Pastry was the local joke, a fragile kid obsessed with being a budget Willy Wonka. He spent his days sculpting sugar instead of doing anything useful, hoping he'd somehow become the king of candy before reality hit him like a stale cupcake. Everything changed when the universe decided his baking career needed a permanent and very aggressive retirement plan. During a cooking stream in a literal kitchen from hell, his life ended when his own art turned on him. A massive sugar statue crushed him flat. But the kid's tragic comedy wasn't over yet. He woke up reborn as a broke nobleman's son with way too much attitude. His father, Casserole, was a stubborn guy who clearly played too much Minecraft. He ditched high society to dig in the dirt, trying to turn a wasteland into a village with nothing but his bare hands. Through sheer spite and manual labor, the farm actually survived. Pastry grew up but didn't exactly improve. A guy named Zero tried teaching him how to use a sword. But the boy just daydreamed about eclairs while getting beat up. He basically became the undisputed heavyweight champion of family disappointments. Then Casserole's right-hand man, Fuel, showed up with a bit of news. Surprisingly, Pastry's gardening tips actually made the bean harvest not a total disaster. The kid was hyped about making treats, but Casserole just watched him with a look of pure parental regret. He figured kids half Pastry's age were already better at being actual productive humans. Before they could bond over that failure, Fuel dropped a real bomb. A pack of bandits was heading their way, and the local cops were useless. Pastry panicked, realizing if those thugs showed up to their sad little village, all his hardened ingredients would be burned to a crisp, along with their hopes. They had 2 months before the unwanted guests arrived. Casserole wasn't about to sit around and wait for his demise. He decided to draft the local peasants for a preemptive strike. Asking Count Radist for help was off the table. Those fancy nobles would rather die than admit they can't handle a few burglars. Being a laughingstock in the capital is apparently worse than getting pillaged. While they argued about the cost of war, Pastry realized his chocolate factory dreams were circling the drain. Fuel then suggested a truly desperate move. He wanted to use the kid's rage as a battery. The goal was to jumpstart Pastry's dormant magical powers. Surprisingly, Casserole agreed to use his son as a guinea pig, because, honestly, what else were they going to do? His wife, Agnes, hated the idea at first, obviously. She went full mama bear, but Casserole's silver tongue eventually won her over. Suddenly, her mood flipped, and she gave Pastry a terrifying makeover involving weird hairstyles and a bunch of girls calling him cute, which is arguably worse than being attacked by bandits. The boy cursed his luck for having 5 sisters and a mother who treats him like a doll. Deep down, though, he didn't hate the attention. He said goodbye to his only friends, Luminito and Mark. Then his dad hauled him off to the capital in a janky wagon. Once there, Pastry stared at the high-end fruit like a kid in a candy store. Dad promised him a treat if he didn't die during the magic ritual. The kid focused on these shiny apples they call bonkers in this world. Casserole thought his son was some secret genius strategist for eyeing the fruit. In reality, Pastry was just calculating pie recipes while they walked toward the church. They met a priest who looked like he'd been drinking straight espresso for a week. The guy was confused that a broke noble could afford a ritual, but he took the gig anyway. He threw Pastry into a straitjacket, forced some mystery juice down his throat, and locked him in a dark hole. Days passed, and Casserole started to get a little nervous. The priest kept making it worse, mentioning how people usually lose their minds in that room. But Pastry was actually vibing in the darkness. He spent the time dreaming of apple tarts and turning this fantasy world into a sugary empire once his powers finally kicked in. When he finally woke up, he didn't see a beautiful maiden. He just saw his dad's sweaty, exhausted face staring back at him. The ritual lasted 2 days, which meant the kid's magic potential was actually off the charts. It turns out he hit the jackpot with the ultra-rare magic of replication. Pastry finally understood what people meant by having thick plot armor. Casserole was thrilled, thinking his kid might actually save their dirt-poor village. He began to believe they had a real shot at survival. Casserole tried to bribe the priest to keep things quiet, but the priest felt insulted by the small payment and promised to scream the kid's legend from the rooftops like a total lunatic. On the way home, they bought a sack of fruit, and Pinky promised not to tell Mom about their spending. Meanwhile, in a nearby ruined town, some sketchy guys were complaining about being hungry. Their leader, Chat, suggested raiding Casserole's place for snacks and human labor. Fuel rushed back with the news, making the Lord nearly blow a fuse because the bandits were early. Casserole went into full panic mode, ordering his scouts to mess up the water supply in the other villages and hide all the food. He was trying to funnel the bandits into one spot. He wanted them focused exactly where he'd be waiting. Basically, he was setting up a very violent welcome home party. Even Pastry knew his dad's army of farmers wouldn't last 5 minutes against real killers. He realized they needed a plan that didn't involve just dying. Casserole gave him the high-priority task of picking up rocks, because apparently that was the peak of their military technology. While the help got moving, Mark started bragging about how he's way tougher than Pastry. He claimed he was the hero, but Luminito reminded him that he was basically just an extra in someone else's show. The bickering stopped when the sound of horses got way too close. They slammed the gates shut just in time. The amateur soldiers outside were shaking in their boots. Casserole gave a classic fight-or-die speech to try and stop them from wetting themselves. He told them cowardice wasn't on the menu today. He told everyone to nap until sunrise, betting the bandits wouldn't attack in the dark. Since they didn't have magic eyes, they were essentially blind. But Casserole also knew the hungry beast rule. Desperate criminals tend to bite even when they can't see what they're chewing on. They couldn't agree on a plan, so they asked the oldest guy in the room for his 2 cents. The old-timer told them to stop guessing and actually go look at what the enemy was doing. Casserole decided to handle the recon himself. He acted as bait and dragged fuel along to the bandit camp. While Dad was away, Pastry started bossing people around like a mid-level manager at a tech startup. He reminded everyone that even though he was a side character, his dad's reputation was on the line, and he began setting traps. He put Luminito in charge of the Fire Arrows team. Meanwhile, Fuel's magic vision revealed these weren't just random bums, they were actual professionals. The lead bandit was currently explaining the trap to his crew with a very punchable face. They knew they were being led into an ambush. Casserole hit them first anyway, proving that he didn't care about their feelings. He used simple hits because he wasn't trying to show off. But when he got winded, he beelined back to the village with the survivors chasing him. That was exactly what he wanted. The thieves got a warm welcome from Pastry's flaming arrows. It was basically a high-stakes schoolyard prank. Pastry then signaled the rock-throwing squad to open fire. Incredibly, the combination of literal garbage and sheer annoyance actually took out most of the gang. The leader was naturally pretty ticked off about this. He pulled a small knife and stormed into the village like he owned the place. The villagers tried to stop him but got swatted away. He started slashing through Pastry's buddies, heading straight for the kids. Everyone thought about how much life sucks sometimes and how adding more screaming to the world seemed unnecessary. Pastry jumped in before the villain could finish the job. He ruined the guy's momentum with a move he never saw coming. But the bandit flipped the script and grabbed Pastry as a human shield. Pastry just used his new spell to make the other thieves feel like they were literally on fire. Enough to make a grown man cry for his mommy. Mark finally contributed by tossing a rock at the villain's head like a pro. By morning, news of Mark's battle scar hit the village. Agnes panicked but chilled once she realized he just needed a band-aid. Pastry, meanwhile, was busy playing village king and looking entirely too smug. He started handing out snacks to the locals like a politician. Casserole decided to chuck the remaining bandits into a barn. Since they were too broke for a real jail, he figured he'd ship them to the county court and pray for a good citizen reward. He then tossed the leftover crumbs of their budget to the peasants. Mark and Luminito were hyped to get thrift store rags and grain that expired in the 90s. They hauled the junk to Mark's place, where he felt like a total baller. After soaking up some motherly love, the duo decided to go poke the bears in the barn where the bandits were chilling. They walked in like they were the main characters, but got shut down immediately. Mark actually used his brain for once to distract the guards and sneak inside. They laughed at the bandits' misery until the leader noticed Mark's rusty sword. Turns out it was his sword yesterday. He saw Mark's greed and started plotting. The crook offered to teach the kids some dark magic. Luminito smelled the scam from a mile away. Mark took the bait anyway and got a very painful lesson in getting kicked in the ribs. The villain broke loose, grabbed his sword, sliced Luminito and kidnapped Mark for a joyride. The other thieves tried to follow, but their boss totally ghosted them. He rode off into the sunset on a stolen horse. Pastry heard the commotion and ran to see if Luminito was still alive. Once he saw she was just leaking a bit, he hopped on a horse to give chase. As he rode, he wondered if his plot armor was thick enough for this boss fight. He hoped his forest traps would do the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, Casserole tried to help. But Fuel stopped him to talk about optics and reputation. Seriously, Fuel. Out in the woods, Mark used his one true power, being incredibly loud and annoying. It worked, they both got stuck, and Pastry showed up right on cue, looking like a budget hero. He knew he was outclassed, but he gave a cringy speech about friendship anyway to hide the fact he was terrified. Later, Fuel found nothing but Pastry's broken sword in the dirt. She started the waterworks immediately, only to find the kid perfectly fine at home. Mom couldn't figure out how her disaster son survived, so she demanded the secret source. He basically told her she wasn't smart enough to get it, even if he used small words. And then, he admitted he'd stolen his mother's teleportation trick using his copy-paste magic. His dad was mostly just jealous and told him to stop disappearing like a ninja. They held a meeting of the useless council to worry about mining companies turning the kid into a human battery. Meanwhile, Mark was busy milking his injuries for as much sympathy as possible. Pastry showed up and told him to go see Luminito, but Mark went full drama queen. Pastry had zero patience for the tears and told him to grow a pair. He said if Mark wanted to be more than a wet noodle, he had to act like a man. He then literally dragged the crying boy to Luminito's front door. Pastry apologized for being a side character and hid in the kitchen to do what he actually likes. He figured if life hands you lemons, you make a very fancy apple lemon tart. In the other room, Mark was busy begging for Luminito's forgiveness on his knees. His face was bright red. He asked if she'd still put up with his idiocy as a partner. She just stared at him, probably wondering where it all went wrong. Pastry walked back in, looking like he just won MasterChef with a fresh pie. He served them both a slice, and suddenly the trauma felt a little more delicious. The kid went on a weirdly intense rant about apple varieties and how they change everything. He compared fruit to people, which is a bit of a stretch, but they rolled with it. He then dropped the news that he still wanted Mark in his future army of failure. Mark actually felt useful for once, which is a low bar, but he cleared it. Then Luminito's dad barged in and declared that Mark had to marry his daughter now. Luminito, who was now rocking a cool scar, said sure, without a second thought. She figured her modeling career was over, so she couldn't be picky. Mark turned into a tomato, and they all ate pie while pretending life was great. But the vibes died when the family realized they were still completely broke. Casserole complained that the bank account was at zero and the cupboards were bare. Naturally, he blamed Pastry for ruining their reputation and making them unloanable. He said no sane bank would touch them with a 10-foot pole. Pastry suggested hitting up the in-laws for cash, but that was a huge mistake. Dad was a terrible leader who got disowned after marrying Agnes against his parents' wishes. As he vented, he noticed his friends were too busy flirting to care about his trauma. That's when it hit him right in the feels. He was officially the third wheel in his own story. He asked if anyone had a get-rich-quick scheme that actually worked. Luminito suggested a pie shop, but Pastry reminded her they couldn't even afford the apples. Mark suggested teaching magic, but Pastry didn't want to be a broke tutor for idiots. Luminito brought up the time Mark set himself on fire trying to be cool. She called him a moron, and Pastry's headache got 10 times worse. The bickering was making his brain bleed. Then a weirdly good idea popped up. Using magic to become a tattoo artist actually sounded like a decent side hustle. They started drawing designs, but Mark's dragon looked more like a deformed lizard. Mark got offended and told her to wait until he saw a real dragon, which was awkward. To stop the fighting, Pastry copied the drawings onto their skin with magic. The ink actually looked halfway decent. They both fell in love with their new stamps immediately. Luminito asked if he could copy things that weren't just drawings. Pastry had a light bulb moment and called her a genius for the first time ever. He ran to his parents and reminded Dad how he used teleportation to sneak sis into parties. He asked how normal, non-magical families found rich husbands for their daughters. Agnes said they spent a fortune traveling just to show their faces. Dad loved it, mostly because he saw dollar signs on his son's forehead. Agnes asked Pastry to Photoshop her wrinkles with magic, but he just sighed. He was tired of being the family's personal beauty filter. The boys traveled to meet the Countess, who basically caused their bankruptcy. Dad tried to act cool, but the Countess was too busy judging Pastry's hair dye. They sat down for some fancy tea. Pastry saw the old-school desserts, and his inner baker started screaming. Casserole started brown-nosing like his life depended on it. The Countess made it clear she thought their taste was trash, which was rude. They talked shop, and Dad tried to give Pastry all the credit for the farm's success. Pastry pitched a plan: use magic to make heiries dating profiles of Agnes for the nobles. Pastry mentioned the bandits and dropped a hint about calling the royal army. He knew the thugs came from her territory and played that card perfectly. She played dumb and dared them to prove it with actual evidence. But Casserole pulled out a sword with her logo on it. Talk about a gotcha moment. The Countess realized she was cornered and tried to buy their silence. Pastry negotiated like a shark and walked away with 150 gold coins. She was fuming, finally realizing the kid was the real brain behind the operation. As they left, she snidely pointed out that he barely touched the tea. He told her the biscuits were way too sweet and offered her some constructive criticism. Casserole, officially done with the lecturing, just offered a half-hearted apology. Pastry followed suit and handed over a knockoff painting he'd made. The Count was so easily impressed, it was actually kind of sad. The next day, they hit up the Cadillac estate for a birthday bash for the grandson, Squall. The kid looked like he'd been awake for 3 days straight on a caffeine bender. Cadillac fanboyed over Casserole's war stories, telling them to treat the place like a 5-star hotel. Pastry felt a bit weirded out by all the unwanted attention. Once the boring rituals wrapped up, the snobby nobles finally noticed Pastry, acting like they'd liked him all along. People even started wondering if they should just swap the awkward grandson for Pastry instead. The boy kept flexing his skills, leaving the Duke jaw-dropped. Using his fresh magic, he conjured a 3D model of a girl that was definitely generously designed, making Squall wander over with a curious look. He asked if Petra had a type. Pastry deadpanned that the girl liked sugar and offered to bake her something. Squall totally missed the point and just started barking orders like a brat. He wanted the portrait to be hotter or whatever. Pastry just rolled his eyes at how shallow the kid was. Later that night, a bunch of locals cornered Casserole, demanding more pay. Before things got messy, Pastry saved the day with 2 letters from the big bosses. The verdict was in. Petra and Squall were officially a thing. Casserole got a fat stack of cash just for being the middleman. Fuel, ever the skeptic, had a thought. He asked if they could just teleport her there. Casserole shut that down fast. That only works if you have soldiers waiting on the other side. And they were fresh out of time. The kid suggested just giving up on the plan. But Casserole wasn't having it. He told him this was a once-in-a-lifetime payday. Quitting now meant being broke forever. Pastry sighed and agreed, thinking about his future candy empire. Then he had a big brain moment. He suggested taking Petra to a magic ceremony as a distraction. They could stash her there for 2 days until the paperwork cleared. Casserole loved it, mostly because he had 0 other ideas. Pastry tried to sneak away, hoping his dad wouldn't notice the money he'd borrowed. But Casserole found the secret apple and sugar stash and was not amused. He gave the kid a solid reality check. The next morning, they went to pick up Petra for the trip. It turned out to be a buy one, get one deal because Petra had a twin sister. Petra tried to flirt with Pastry to score some free cookies, but Pastry just started ranting about the gluten content of the flour. He tried talking to the quiet twin, Loris, in the carriage. She gave him the cold shoulder. Petra told her to snap out of it. She warned Loris that being a wallflower gets you nowhere in life. But the girl just retreated further into her shell. Pastry realized something was up when Petra went silent too. Eventually, the dads hopped in and they made tracks for the church. Some sketchy mercenaries tried to jump them, but Casserole handled it like a boss. One guy tried to go for the girls, but Pastry laid him out flat. They finally made it to the church in one piece. Petra was daydreaming about her fiancé, while Loris actually caught someone's eye by being the only one not trying. She realized she'd been a jerk to Pastry and decided to be slightly less annoying. They met up to do a teleportation spell to zip over to the capital. Meanwhile, in a hidden basement somewhere, a guy looking like a bootleg Michael Jackson was making some shady calls. The job was simple: snatch a girl, get 10 gold coins, easy money. The mastermind was an ex-military guy with a massive chip on his shoulder. His goons were confused why he was trying so hard to be a noble again. The plan was to kidnap Squall's girl and force her to fall in love with him. Because nothing says romance like Stockholm Syndrome, right? At the end of the day, it was all about the paycheck. Back at the church, Petra was bored out of her mind. She was obsessed with the drawing and couldn't wait to meet the real Squall. Pastry bragged about his matchmaking skills, comparing it to a perfect cake. But his dad told him to put a sock in it. Casserole told Pastry to take Loris to the guest room to chill. Pastry thought he might get some alone time, but a sick maid wouldn't leave them alone, ruining the vibe. While the weirdo villain was drinking wine and dreaming of glory, Petra headed to the palace. Pastry was still trying to find a way to talk to Loris without an audience. Suddenly, a magic trapdoor opened and swallowed them both whole. Casserole saw it happen and smelled a rat immediately. He called for backup and dove into the hole after them. Pastry woke up in a creepy basement with Loris tied up next to him. He realized they were in a seriously bad neighborhood. Talk about a bad day. He was definitely not getting a 5-star review for this. The kidnapper walked in and acted like it was just a normal Tuesday. Pastry demanded answers, but the guy just gave him the silent treatment. The kid wondered when he became a high-value target for the mob. Then it hit him they wanted Loris, and he was just the extra who got snatched by mistake. The thug Mario told him to shut his mouth before things got physical. Just then, the dad crossed through the portal. Loris finally woke up. She thought Pastry was there to save her, but no such luck. He had to admit he was in the same boat as her. He promised she'd be fine as long as he was around, though. Gotta love that main character confidence. Mario got annoyed and threatened to snap Pastry like a twig. Pastry figured out that Mario was the only one with actual muscle, and the boss was a total poser. He decided to play along for a bit. He put on a show of fake tears, claiming his family was loaded and would pay a fortune for him. The boss got greedy, which was exactly what Pastry wanted. The kid managed to trick the boss into revealing he was the Duke of the army. Pastry pieced together the old beef between the Duke and Loris's family. He scratched a secret SOS into his clothes and sent it out to his useless father. He hoped Dad could actually read this time. Meanwhile, Loris's dad proved he was the worst father ever by refusing to help. He was too busy kissing up to nobles and treating his other daughter like a trade-in. The maid started giving Casserole a lecture on parenting, which was rich, until Dad's right-hand man stepped in. Pastry's message finally got through, and Casserole realized his old rival was the one behind the snatching. He sent fuel away and went solo for the rescue. The kidnapper realized he'd grabbed the wrong twin and came back ready to rage. Pastry tried to play hero, but mostly just got his clock cleaned. With the kid on the floor, the boss went in for the kill on Loris, but she shouted for Pastry like a battle cry. He stood back up and told the creep to back off her. Mario realized the kid was actually a threat and backed down. He tried to run, but Casserole was already blocking the door. Mario panicked and tried to find another way out, only to run into the dad again. He used a weak magic trick to open another hole and escaped like a coward. Pastry realized there were no easy shortcuts in this world. He had to spend the night with his grumpy dad and his potential future wife. 2 more losers showed up to make Pastry's life even harder. One of them grabbed Loris, claiming he was taking her home. Later, they found out the whole rebel army was busted. Casserole spilled the tea on how he lost his noble title for selling secrets 20 years ago. His goons demanded an explanation, but he just gave them attitude and ran off with Pastry. Back to the ruined mansion they went. Pastry finally puts 2 and 2 together and realizes the villain never had the juice to pull off a real getaway. The guy was just a massive coward playing dress-up. He heads back to his room, only to find the bad guy was camping out there the whole time with the family. The creep actually gives Pastry a slow clap for solving the puzzle before trying to slice them both in half. Pastry plays it cool and calls for a fair one-on-one scrap. Mario goes for the kill, swinging like he's actually got a chance of ending this in one go. But Pastry literally bites the sword until it snaps like a breadstick. Talk about having teeth of steel. He stands there holding the broken blade, silently thanking the enemy for having such garbage equipment that he could just copy the structural failure. Fast forward a month. Squall and Petra are now besties, and Pastry hits up their wedding to grill Duke Kotok about the fake intel he leaked to the kidnappers. The kid suspects the Duke was just trying to prune the family tree by getting rid of the competition. The Duke plays dumb, but Pastry smells the rat and uses the dirt to shake him down for a fat paycheck. He threatens to accidentally spill the tea to Duke Hubert if the price isn't right. Kotal folds like a lawn chair and pays up, cursing the kid for being a pint-sized mastermind. Hubert wanders over to say thanks and then gets weirdly personal, asking if Pastry has any special friends. Pastry wonders why this old man is so obsessed with a kid's non-existent dating life. He tries to play the "I'm just a baby" card, but the Duke insists he lock things down with Loris pronto. Everyone is cringing, and Pastry tries to say Loris can do better, but the Duke thinks he's insulting her and gets defensive. Pastry shuts up to keep his winnings, especially since his dad is already mentally spending the dowry. The crowd starts cracking jokes, and Pastry officially loses all hope in the human race right then and there. Loris finds him later to say thanks for the rescue, which actually makes him blush. Wait, is there actually a spark there? Disgusting. The happy couple tries to make it a double date vibe, but Pastry hits the panic button. He just wants to go home and nap, but Loris plays the "I'm still traumatized" card to keep him close. He promises her that their friendship is the real deal. She tries to seal the deal with some homemade cookies, but she clearly mixed up the salt and sugar jars. Pastry eats the salt bombs like a champ anyway, lying through his teeth about how good they are just to see her smile. He pinky swears to be her bodyguard for life. Meanwhile, Casserole is having a midlife crisis talking to Agnes, who thinks he's cheating with some rich lady. She's ready to throw hands over a misunderstanding. Dad and son head out, not realizing Agnes is already planning the wedding of the century. Elsewhere, a rival noblewoman finds out about the engagement and loses her mind that he's with some nobody girl. She takes a deep breath and decides to play the long game instead. Pastry realized Hubert was the puppet master all along, using the whole kidnapping drama to scout his talent. People thought he was being paranoid, but it's clear Hubert saw how the kid turned a sandbox into a goldmine and wanted a piece of the action. The Duke was definitely patting himself on the back for that move. Meanwhile, our hero is celebrating his blackmail profits while his hungry friends circle like vultures. They show up expecting a buffet, but it's just a bunch of saplings. She feels like an idiot once he explains it's about Pastry's engagement and bails before it gets even more awkward. The menu is looking a bit woody today, boys. Luminito asks if they're eating bark now, but Pastry explains the trees are just there to bribe the bees for that sweet, sweet honey. Dad and the crew finally count the coins and realize they actually turned a profit for once in 20 years. Casserole calls the kid a miracle and thanks his right-hand man for not quitting when things were looking grim. Fuel tells him to chill because the work has only just begun. There's a whole village to build and 40 hungry people moving in tomorrow. Plus, Pastry is coming back with his friends, which usually means double the trouble. Dad regrets his life choices while the kid, rocking a bald look, starts using mountains as punching bags to copy Mario's magic. He keeps at it until he smashes open a reservoir, planning for the next rainy day. The plan is to turn the ditch into a massive watering hole for his forest. Pastry starts tripping out, dreaming of how he's going to turn this dirt patch into a literal candy land. Mark snaps him out of it just before Dad can blow a gasket. Meanwhile, the gossip queen is annoyed that nobody is paying attention to her anymore. Since Pastry isn't in jail, she's got nothing to do. She just sips her tea and tries to figure out how to force her way back into the spotlight. A few days later, Pastry is basically a local influencer when he gets a letter his sister thinks is a love note. He gets all hopeful, but it's just a boring invite to a tea party. Talk about a bait and switch. He wonders what his sister is actually up to with this weird social move. He heads home, acting like he owns the place as usual, only to find out Dad is hitting the road for the capital again. While trying to talk logistics, a random guy pops up like a jump scare, warning him that women are basically a one-way ticket to prison. He tells him to chase the bag instead of the girls, specifically mentioning the fiancé. The saucepan is sticking around. Rumors are flying, and Luminito is imagining Pastry getting whipped by some bossy, curvy older woman. In reality, the kid is just in the kitchen, which is his true safe space, making more dough. Hubert's goons are asking why he dumped his daughter in a poverty-stricken village. The boss says it's a tactical move to keep her away from the schemers while a war is brewing. It's basically a high-end witness protection program. Loris is hanging out in the kitchen, trying to flirt but failing miserably. She asks a bunch of dumb questions about whether apples are actually apples. She finds out the kid is so broke, he's basically skipping his own lunch to keep her fed. When the syrup is ready, Pastry looks at it with more love than he's ever shown a human being. Loris is starting to feel a bit jealous of a condiment. He starts making little sugar doodles that look like they belong on a fridge, but he's proud of them. Loris can't help but find his dorky excitement kind of charming. He's totally oblivious to the fact she's catching feelings. The whole family is acting like the FBI, spying on them and getting annoyed that the kid is more interested in baking than in romance. He's just worried about getting the candy apples right because he's got his priorities straight. Once everything is set, he calls in the taste testers, who were already hiding in the bushes. Awkward, he caught them red-handed. The moms bail instantly, leaving the friends to deal with Pastry's hangry wrath as he hoards all the treats. When the big day finally hits, Pastry is mentally pawning the fancy furniture to save the village budget. The maids are not happy about it. They tell him to stop thinking about money and look at his date for once. But he's just distracted by a massive portrait of her, wondering who thought that was a good decor choice. The Countess's henchman shows up at the bakery, throwing shade and acting tough. But Pastry doesn't care because he's just here to move some product. He uses Loris's name to hype up his jar of hard candies to the fancy crowd. The nobles go into a feeding frenzy and buy everything, even the tough guy henchman who clearly has a sweet tooth. Pastry tries to cut a deal to lower taxes in exchange for candy, but a new problem walks in. The plans are officially on hold. A very well-endowed lady steals the show, and Loris goes into full jealous mode, trying to mark her territory. But the kid is entranced by the Queen of Plots and follows her into a private room like a lost puppy. He asks why she's looking at him like that. She says it's because he looks like a porcelain doll compared to real magic users. He doesn't really get it, but he definitely notices her assets before getting down to business. He tries to win her over by pitching his dream of building a sugar farm right in her own backyard. Ra was skeptical, thinking it was impossible to farm in this dust bowl, and worried the kid was plotting something even more unhinged. She decided to back his play anyway, leaving Pastry feeling awkward since he had no idea how to pay her back for the help. As Pastry became the center of attention, Loris got hit with a wave of jealousy, wondering what he was doing alone with a bombshell like Ra. She felt like a total plain Jane compared to that kind of competition. Battling her anxiety, Loris bailee to her room, trying to drown her feelings by dreaming of making a killing in the candy business. Gree got nosy and started grilling Pastry about Loris, asking if he really pulled off that dramatic rescue from the kidnappers. She asked if he was actually in love with her, and while Pastry turned into a literal tomato, he was way too socially awkward to give a straight answer. Seizing the moment, Gree caught him in a bear hug from behind, telling him she wouldn't let go until he spilled his guts about his feelings. Pastry, having never been this close to a girl in his life, basically short-circuited and was about to crack under the pressure. Right then, Loris walked in like a jump scare. She totally ruined Gree's plan, making her realize she'd missed her shot at both the guy and the paycheck. Pastry scrambled after Loris, who was busy trying to outrun her own annoying, judgmental maid. He eventually cornered her in the garden, where she was having a quiet breakdown. He tried to fumble through an apology, hoping he could fix the vibe. But she lashed out, claiming the whole situation was rigged against her from the start. She told him she'd never be on his level. She assumed he was all about Ra's attributes, while she was built like a piece of plywood. The waterworks wouldn't stop as she compared herself to her sister, who actually had confidence, making her feel even more pathetic. Acting like he hadn't just been cuddled by another girl, he begged her to trust his intentions. Pastry cut her off mid-rant and swore he liked her exactly the way she was, flaws and all. Loris gave a clumsy little nod, and just as she started to smile, the kid vanished into thin air, teleporting home like a ninja. The audience watched the whole mess, figuring Pastry's love life was officially a dumpster fire. He popped back in after a bit, and while Loris was hoping for jewelry, he just handed her one of his sticky candied apples. He told her he'd customized it just for her, complete with a dorky little heart carved into the skin. She was so done with his sugar addiction that she just shut up and took a bite. The taste reminded her of their first time in the kitchen together, which actually made her tear up while he geeked out about his candy apple obsession. While she debated if some sugar and good vibes were enough to forgive his behavior, Pastry begged for one more chance. Falling for the sugar-coated trap, she forgave her candy god and took the win. But before they could have a moment, that buzzkill maid showed up again and dragged Loris away. Left alone, Pastry ran into his new hire, Niccolo, who immediately started making fun of his playboy lifestyle. To keep him in line, Pastry brought out his budget brand owl, Susan. He threatened to work Niccolo into the ground for half the pay if he leaked any family gossip. Back at the ranch, Mom jumped him immediately, teasing him about trying to charm his way into high society with fruit. She only let go when Loris walked in, but the kid was already trying to bolt. The gossip queen realized he'd brought home some seriously spicy news from that tea party. After a breather, she got him to spill the beans over more tea, finding out he was shipping revenge treats to Ra's dad, the guy who'd been blocking his path to the rich guy lifestyle since day one. When the word got out, Russ went ballistic and started a rumor mill about how he's into way younger girls. His terrible advisors weren't helping as Pastry sifted through marriage offers from literal 10-year-olds. Then Hubert's right-hand man, who looked like he just stepped off Mount Olympus, dropped the bad news. The Ludar army was coming to crash the wedding with a massive force. He admitted the Cottle family was too clueless to see the threat coming. Terrified of losing his investments, Pastry started writing letters for backup. Meanwhile, he explained to Fuel that he was going to use his candy money to buy 100 goats to make cheese for his pies. Fuel pointed out that the last time they had goats, they ate the landscape to death, but Pastry was sure his new water tanks would prevent an ecological disaster. He was already planning on adding a whole petting zoo of chickens and cows. Bobo asked if he was just in it for the nuggets. Pastry told him to keep his hands off the birds, since he needed those eggs for the custards that were going to save his soul. The kid then forced Bobo into another taste test for some vegan syrup he'd cooked up. Fuel said it was basically liquid diabetes, which meant it was perfect. He then sent his friends back to the labor camps to build a machine for extracting more syrup. Luminito tried to fix the juicer, but Mark's massive ego and weight just kept getting in the way. In the middle of a wrestling match, they both wiped out and snapped the handle clean off. Loris suggested they build something like a wine press instead, an idea that Pastry actually liked for once. He ran to tell his dad, only to get hit with the news that the war was officially popping off. Dad said the Ludar army was going to be at their doorstep in just a few days. Pastry finally started to sweat a little. While the kid was whipping up cream, the guys were training and wondering if making butter was a secret military workout. Pastry laughed and told them it wouldn't build any muscle, which annoyed Cyril since the kid's diet was basically just carbs and prayers. The Ludar army was busy in their war room. They realized their fake numbers hadn't fooled Hubert at all. They figured Hubert was either flying solo because he was arrogant or because no one else liked him enough to help. Either way, they were looking at a 10,000-man brawl. Then they heard Squall was in the building, which gave the general some very evil ideas. Loris tried to be deep in the kitchen, saying wars wouldn't happen if everyone just had a sweet tooth. Hard to fight a war when you're in a sugar coma. Pastry promised her a cheesecake once his goats arrived, but fate had other plans. Turns out some local con artist stole his goats and probably ate them for dinner. The merchant claimed he was forced into selling them to someone else instead of Casserole. Dad said they just had to take the L and move on for now. With a war coming, goat drama was the least of their problems. But Pastry wasn't about to let his cheese dreams die. He was ready to go full Karen on the merchant and speak to the manager. Casserole held him back before he did something stupid. He pointed out the Baron didn't technically steal them, he bought them. Yelling at a rich guy wasn't going to get the goats back, so they'd have to be smarter about their revenge. Dad suggested they join Hubert's army as reinforcements instead. That way they'd get top-tier supplies and a chance to liberate the goats during the chaos. Mark whined about wanting to join the squad, but Luminito shut him down, calling him a liability who'd just trip over his own feet. Loris was crushed that Pastry was leaving so soon, but he was too busy dreaming about goat cheese to notice. Meanwhile, Squall was having a full-blown meltdown over Petra. Ruba showed up to mock him, making some comments about his lady's killer instincts. Then the Greek god guy showed up with the news that the Ludars were at the gate. It was finally time for the main event. The enemy only had 10,000 guys, so Ruba felt cocky. He saw the attackers were actually just sitting back and waiting. It was obvious they were setting up an ambush for the front line. Pastry and Casserole hauled tail to save the kid before he became enemy fertilizer. He told Squall it was time to man up and lead the front line like a real soldier. It didn't take long for the Ludar army to completely box in Squall's unit. The kid finally realized he was cooked, essentially just meat waiting for the smoker. The kid was so hyped he looked like he was about to solo the entire enemy army by himself. His guys were begging for a plan, and he tried to call a retreat before noticing every exit was barred. The only way out was through a very violent front door. Just as things were looking fatal, Pastry swooped in for the save, and Squall nearly had a breakdown from relief. After the dust settled, Squall clung to Pastry's hand like he was a literal saint. He was silently grateful, but the sight of all the soldiers who died on his watch hit him like a freight train. Ludar took the loss with a side of salt, clearly annoyed by Hubert's brain and Casserole's brawn. Back at the ranch, Hubert threw a party for his daughter's safety and basically declared Pastry a local god. He and the dad spent the night exaggerating Squall's heroism to save face. They knew he was basically a wet noodle, and when Petra showed up worried, Squall told her to bait it because he was busy sulking. He blew off her concern, leaving Petra to feel the full weight of the day's disaster. It was the first time she'd seen Squall be anything other than a try-hard flirt. She wanted to help him fix his shattered ego, but she felt just as useless as he did. Squall nearly had a heart attack but agreed, hoping he'd look cool enough for Petra to like him. Casserole, showing a rare bit of empathy, remembered how Pastry cured Mark's depression and wondered if the kid could work his magic again. But a shark-toothed enemy general was already planning Squall's funeral. Pastry and Dad finally arrived at the planning meeting at Hubert's place. Remembering that sugar usually beats a bad mood, the boy headed back to the kitchen to bake another peace offering. Hubert was busy throwing the biggest "we didn't die" party in history. Casserole knew the enemy formation looked weird but couldn't figure out the why. But Squall was still in a permanent bad mood. In the kitchen, Pastry was focused on the dough, layering butter and apples for the ultimate pity party dessert. Pastry used his magic to get a bird's-eye view of the situation. Cyril tried to hype Squall up, telling him his character was great even if his combat skills were trash. But Squall couldn't stop seeing the ghosts of the battlefield. Then Pastry walked in and went straight for Squall's deepest insecurities. He distracted him with a compliment about his father-in-law before sliding a plate of tat in his way. Pastry deadpanned that the recipe was actually a tribute to Squall being a total failure. He explained the pie was an accident because the cook forgot the bottom crust and just slapped it on top. It basically ruined the plan but created something better and more interesting. Squall sat there feeling awkward. As Pastry preached about how massive screw-ups can sometimes turn into delicious miracles, it hit home for Squall, who'd been raised with the idea that failing was a literal sin. Petra piped up, saying she was just glad he wasn't a corpse. They spent a moment talking about leadership and growth, and Squall promised to try and suck less in the future. He still gave Pastry the cold shoulder, though only offering him a drink to be polite. Pastry finally went home loaded with loot from the Huberts, and told Fuel that Dad had bullied the Duke into buying back all the goats. The whole thing was a giant trap designed to eat small units for breakfast. Fuel looked so intense it actually gave the kid the creeps. When Casserole got back, he used his teleportation trick to move the whole herd, turning their tiny village into a loud, smelly zoo. He then bolted back to the capital for more business, leaving the others to fume over the kid's absolute audacity. A few days later, Pastry finally baked that cheesecake for Loris, and that's how his sugar-coated adventures came to a close.